Well, may as well check Twitter, start up the day here, see what's going on in the world. Maybe see if there's any, big F1 news coming out right now. Who knows? Oh, Sainz going to Ferrari here. Cool. Well, that sucks. I gotta get... Okay. Fix this. That works, right? It's good enough. So what is going on, you brake calipers? I'm going to start off by taking this literal piece of paper and tape off my head because, let's be real, this isn't an arts and crafts channel. You didn't come here for that, but basically, this week we have a very, very special guest who I won't introduce quite yet, even though you probably already know who it is. But basically, what is going to be happening on this channel is we're going to be kind of having a little bit of banter, a little bit of debate on who is better, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton. Probably the biggest rivalry of the 2010s. That's probably over by now, if we're honest with ourselves, especially with Seb announcing his departure from Ferrari. But we can look back and kind of go through who we think is the better driver between the two in that era. And how this is going to work is basically I'm going to tell you right now why I think Sebastian Vettel is the better driver, and then we'll bring in our very special guest to give his reasons why he thinks Lewis Hamilton is the better driver, and then we're going to have some debate, some conversation. I'm probably going to lose, but that's okay. It'll be up to you guys to decide that. So why don't we just get right into my opinion. So first things first, to kick things off as to why I think Vettel is the superior driver is I like to look at drivers' heroic race victories or heroic races in general. And you look back on his career and you look at his very first win in the Toro Rosso, which was not a race-winning car, never has been, never will be a race-winning car. And he took that car in the wet in Monza and just flew and got that win in 2008 in a car that was not race worthy. Lewis Hamilton has had a race-winning proper car since he started in F1, and I think the fact that Sebastian Vettel had to genuinely prove himself before getting into that Red Bull seat is incredibly important as to why I think he is the better driver. And now moving on to the World Championship totals, it's easy to look at the numbers between the two and see, Hamilton has 6, Vettel has 4. But how frequently did they win them? Vettel got all 4 of his world titles, 4 years in a row, done. Lewis, he got 1 in 2008, he got 1 in 2014, 1 in 2015, missed out in 2016, and now he's back on 2-3 straight. Vettel did 4 in a row. Lewis couldn't even do that. He did a 4-peat. How often in sports history have you ever heard of a 4-peat? Not even the 80s and 90s Bulls could do a 4-peat, and Sebastian Vettel did it, so that's got to say something about his ability. Now next up, I know a very common argument is to say, Lewis Hamilton has just been utterly dominant in these last few years in the turbo hybrid era, and Vettel hasn't been able to keep up. He hasn't been able, that Ferrari just isn't good enough. He hasn't been able to catch Mercedes. But are we not forgetting the fact that back in when Vettel won his 4 straight titles, Lewis Hamilton was in a very competitive, probably in some cases better car than Sebastian Vettel had in that Red Bull, and still couldn't beat him. So I think in that case, that point is completely nullified. You can't say that, Vettel hasn't been able to catch Lewis in the Mercedes with that Ferrari, so he's not the better driver, but Lewis couldn't catch Seb either. And at that point, he was already a world champion. He had already proven himself in 2008, so why couldn't he bring the better car home to beat Sebastian Vettel? Because that was Sebastian Vettel's prime, and in their primes, Vettel was the better driver. So those are my, biggest reasons. Obviously, there's way more statistics and all those things that we can go on into, but I think, in my opinion, when you're looking at sheer and utter dominance from a driver, 4 straight titles says a lot more to me than, 6 scattered about. To me, that just shows that Sebastian Vettel is the better driver, in my opinion. So now to get into our little special guest. I mean, if you're here, you probably already know who he is, because why wouldn't you? It's Tommo. Tommo, say hi. Say hi to the people that you already know.
Thank you for having me, Zach. It's a pleasure, mate. No, I'm looking forward to this one, because it's an interesting subject, and
it's a
one
hot topic.
That I'm more confident in my opinion on this one than I was on the last. I'll be honest. But yeah,
I'm less confident in my opinion. Anyways, you go ahead, take it away. Give us the reasoning as to why you think Lewis is the guy over Seb.
Okay. So there's a few kind of areas that I think Lewis kind of outweighs Seb. So first and foremost, I've got to say consistency of delivery, in terms of Lewis, since he hit the floor running when he started, and to be fair, so did Seb. But the downs that Seb has had have been far steeper, as far as I'm concerned, than the downs. Because again, Lewis is not a perfect driver. He's had incidents, he's had mistakes, but the consistency he's showed, and he was only a point off another World's Drivers title, so he'd have already been at 7 by now if he'd have won that, which Kimi took. So I think the consistency that he's delivered and showed throughout his career is, I'd argue, second to none in terms of how he's delivered. Not just for one team either, because again, let's talk about adaptability. Not only has Lewis adapted to the new hybrid era, but he's adapted to that with, again, 2 different teams, 2 different complete, backgrounds. Everything's so different, right?
And 2 different regulations too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, you look at the transition Seb made. He went from Toro Rosso, and obviously performed amazingly well, and obviously really fitted that car. And then went to Red Bull, which again is a team that they're not, in terms of behind the scenes, they're not going to be vastly different. So it's not the same transition as if it had gone from, say, Toro Rosso to McLaren, or Toro Rosso to Ferrari, or Toro Rosso to Renault. You know what I mean? Because they are kind of part of the same family. So for me, I'm as much as it was Minardi, obviously Red Bull will have instilled some, top team professionalism, for want of a better term, into that team. So Seb didn't have as much of a jump to make. It was more of a natural progression for him. And for me, Seb hasn't demonstrated that adaptability that I think's so important for a top class racing driver, to be able to adapt to the hardware that he's been given. And Lewis has always adapted and always performed, and Seb hasn't. So again, for me, it's the consistency and the adaptability for me that are the 2 key, absolutely key. Because again, if you give Seb the right piece of hardware, he will be up there and he will smash it and he will deliver. But if you give Lewis any piece of hardware, I think he's going to smash it and deliver. And the 6 world titles, the proof is in the old pudding, and he's still very much the favourite to grab another. Yeah. And I think I think 8 is not out of the question at all. So for me, again, the mistakes in Seb's game have just been so, the thing is, Sebastian's always been a very emotional character, right? As much as he's performed at the very best.
Very emotional.
There's been numerous instances, whether it's when he drove into Lewis, whether it's all his spins, they're not the signs, they're not indicative of a world champion. They're indicative of someone who's rattled, who's shook and is struggling and hasn't got confidence. And Seb's emotions have constantly come out. Lewis, yes, he's much more PR. He's much more quiet and subdued and less kind of personable. And Lewis has been emotional, of course, at times, but I don't feel it's really impacted his performance. Yes, he moans which I don't like. I don't like how much he moans on the radio, but I feel like his performances have always delivered. So that's my monologue on why I think Lewis is better than Seb. So I don't know, Zach. Try prove me wrong, mate. Prove me wrong.
Well, the fans at home have already seen my argument, so I wanna just kind of pick yours apart a little bit. So I noticed you mentioned the adaptability. I don't think I can argue that at all. That is a fair, honest, critique of Seb's driving. I think he definitely did not adapt well to the Ferrari when he joined, which obviously is very upsetting because we all wish that he could have challenged Lewis and have some nice little battles. But I have to say the consistency is where I have to draw an argument because, as I mentioned earlier, he is one of the only people that we know in recent sports history to have a four-peat. 4 straight world titles, all in one. Not even the 80s and 90s Chicago Bulls could do that. Not even Michael Jordan could pull off the 4-peat, but Sebastian Vettel did. And I think, obviously we can look at Seb not being able to catch Lewis in the current day right now. He hasn't been able to. The Ferrari has not been able to match the Mercedes. However, if we think back to those Red Bull days of Seb, obviously extremely dominant, but it wasn't far and away the best car. There was many instances where the McLaren Mercedes that Lewis was in could have actually been the better car, but he still wasn't able to catch Seb because he was just so incredibly dominant. So I really think that if you take both of them in their prime, in their top car, for me, I think Seb is quicker or the better driver.
It's a kind of intertwined thing, isn't it? Because obviously, I think part of the reason why he dominated so much in that 4P, as you say, is because he was in a team where he felt very comfortable, in a car that he felt very comfortable in driving. But I do, and again, I don't have the numbers or any facts. If you're looking for facts, I'm the wrong person, right?
Same here.
But I feel that more of what led to Lewis not winning those titles or Seb not winning the titles from kind of after he was so dominant. I feel like more of those instances were through Seb's own kind of either him getting overly emotional about a situation or him making a massive cock up, spinning, hitting his teammate, whatever. I feel like, and again, like, of course, Lewis and Nico, Lewis has not got a clean sheet either.
No.
But I just think comparatively, I think I would trust, Lewis much more in that kind of battle. Look, we forget there's 3 years between them, right? So that there is a pretty significant, age gap. But again, I just think over when you look at their entire careers, I think that, and because Seb has been so inconsistent this obviously last year, but as well, like 2018, he had issues. Obviously him and Mark Webber, they came to blows a lot, even when when Seb was smashing it. And I just think that, I don't know. I think overall, again, I'm putting my mind. If I'm Toto Wolff, if I'm in charge, if I'm a team principal, and I'm deciding between those two who's going to deliver most points most consistently, 100% I'm going for Lewis. Absolutely no question.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's definitely the more consistent, reliable, easy driver to have on your team. But I mean, even we can go back to the video we have up on your channel with Senna. Senna was not always the most level-headed, easygoing driver either. He was constantly pushing, constantly going, and he obviously had those, those quips with Prost. So I don't think that just because a driver has those quirks and whatnot, obviously he didn't have the spins and all the emotions that Seb has. But I don't think it should detract from the fact that they are a legendary driver, because I think Seb is one of the greats. Is he chalked up in that kind of upper echelon? I don't think so, but I think definitely there's definitely a case to be made for him to be considered better than Lewis.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find it very interesting how certain drivers are able to make a transition. So even look at Pierre Gasly. To his move to Red Bull, and it clearly, again, and that's, I use that argument that, in Seb's favour, I almost use that argument against Seb in terms of moving from Toro Rosso to Red Bull made it easier for him, where it wasn't easy for Pierre.
Yeah.
But again, like these guys are humans, and ultimately Alex was able to make that transition, as far as I'm concerned, much more effectively, much more efficiently. And does that take away from Pierre's ability as a driver? I guess yes and no, because obviously he's proven at Toro Rosso since he's gone back that he's still able to pull out a second place in Brazil. Yes, obviously the circumstances around it, but he put that car in second place at the end of the day, and he thoroughly deserved that result.
For sure.
But why are some drivers able to adapt more than others? It's a really interesting trait. But again, I've got to say that like the way that Lewis has, I feel that Lewis has always adapted and has always made it work in whatever bit of machinery he's been in. And so I just think like that for me, that is a more kind of complete package. It's like, again, if you use football analogy, you know, if someone's a great striker and has zero other traits, doesn't track back, doesn't support the midfield, doesn't do, you know what I mean? Like, I feel that someone who is more like, yes, is exceptional at what they're really, but also is a more complete package. And again, you know, that we talk about kind of Senna and Alonso and Seb, all characters that, you know, can be quite emotional and quite out there and ruffle a few feathers. And in a less productive way. And again, Lewis is of course guilty of it as well at times. But again,
especially early in his career, there was lots of like Crash Stappen vibes going on back then.
Well, again, like you look at the whole Alonso Lewis incident. Can't remember what the year was. You know, when he held him up in the pit lane, Alonso did. Like, that ultimately, I watched there's a Mark Priestley video on it, which is amazing because he was obviously a mechanic at the time for the team, and. It was saying like obviously it was Lewis who started all that by selfishly deciding to go out and reject the team orders, which is a criticism I had in our other video against Senna, in terms of if you're going to agree to do team orders, follow it through, don't be a snake. And Lewis snaked that time. But obviously Alonso got all the backlash, and because he was the British driver, I'll get why Alonso got annoyed. But obviously this ain't about them. This is about obviously, and the way that Seb, I just don't like the way that he reacted to, you know, again, when Ricciardo started knocking on the door and beating that season, Seb was like, bye. You know, Christian Horner loves to say about how Ricciardo ran from a fight against Verstappen. Well, surely Vettel ran from a fight from Ricciardo. And then as soon as Charles comes along, Seb's like, bye, have a great time. So,
that was extremely accurate. Oh man, no, for sure. I think definitely I can agree that, you know, as his career has gone, especially with Ferrari, I mean, it's definitely been a very steep downward spiral. And I unfortunately wasn't, you know, into F1 at the time of Seb's dominance, but just kind of looking back on it, for me, if I were in that time and I'm able to kind of have both perspectives on things, I would easily take 4 straight titles than 6 scattered titles. I mean, that's my take on the situation, but you know.
Yeah, I get that. I think again, if Seb was able to demonstrate that degree of, you know, dominance over a more consistent career period, time frame, whatever, and again, I think that should be a measure of a true great.
Of course.
You know, again, you look at the likes of, you know, again, football. Lionel Messi has done it year after year after year after year after year after year after year, and it's like absolute consistency. I think that is the measure of a great. And again, you look at Michael Schumacher; he did it year after year after year after year, and even when he came back, he still managed to get a podium. Yes, he got a bit lucky, but still, like I don't get that, and it's a shame because unfortunately, Seb will get remembered for the wrong reasons, and it's a real shame because I remember when he was, you know, to be honest, that's part of the reason I kind of fell a bit out of love with Formula One around that time, because I was just like, well, Seb's just bloody winning everything, isn't he? It's too good. I can't be arsed with it.
Yeah.
But actually, like, he won't, unfortunately, because of everything else and the fact that this is now the social media age, particularly in the last kind of few years, that's stepped up massively. Unfortunately, I think he's going to be remembered for the wrong reasons, which is a real shame, because that's the thing.
Yeah.
I really want us, like, I do not dislike Seb. I'm just reading it as
you see it.
Yeah, reading it as I see it. I'm not trying to like invest my personal opinion or whatever in it. I'm just trying to look at things objectively. I would be so happy. The best way this season can go, when it eventually starts, is Seb win the driver's title.
100%.
I would be absolutely gassed for him. I'll be so happy. That's literally he above all else, because I want him. I want him to get that 5 and then retire and just, you know, be happy. That's what I want.
I'm totally with that. He definitely kind of did everything backwards, right? He started out being dominant and then ended his career with the controversial, emotional spins and crashes and stuff, which most guys get out of their systems early in their career. So I completely agree.
This is what Mark Webber said as well. He called it, didn't he? I know there's a quote from him saying he thinks Seb will do everything early. He'll win his titles early. He'll retire early. He'll have kids early. You know, he's done 2 of the 3. And I think retirement's...
it's next.
I hate to say it, but I do think retirement's on the horizon. I think
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm totally with you there, Tommo. I think... well, I mean, let's let the fans at home, vote. I'll pop a card up below while I still can have them, because apparently they're going away. I'll pop
I know.
It's ridiculous. Oh.
No more polls.
So get up there and vote for it while you can, if you think I was right or if Tommo himself was right. I'm probably going to lose. I'm okay with that. I will stand firmly on defeat. But thank you so much again, Tommo, for being a part of this. It's a great honor to have you on the channel. It's been great.
Pleasure, mate. No, thank you for having me. And again, obviously, because there's no more polls, everyone needs to follow Apex, _Apex_F1.
You got it. I'll put the graphic up there somewhere.
Follow that on Twitter, so then Zach can put the polls on Twitter for the corresponding videos. Yeah, because that's what I'm going to do.
That's actually a genius idea.
You're welcome, mate.
That's genius.
So be sure to follow Zach on Twitter, and then you can follow the old polls.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, don't forget to lick the stamp. Send that subscribe button, guys. Thanks again, Tommo. And yeah, have a great day. Peace.
Bye.